So you guys asked a lot of questions. So this has ended up being over 2 hours, right? 2 hours of content for you. And I want to just start with just a little bit of gratitude, bit of appreciation. Like a big thank you to everyone for asking the question, but also like a massive thank you to everyone for helping me achieve 10K subs on this platform. Fantastic. Really good. I feel like it's the beginning of my journey here. You know, I don't feel like I've arrived. I feel like this is almost just a start, you know. So that's been very cool. So I'm very grateful for that. And another thing I've been grateful for in 2024 has been the partnership with Boostcamp. So that has been awesome to be recognized amongst these top coaches who I respect. It feels great. That's been very cool. I feel like I've arrived in the industry, and to be recognized as something which I take a lot of pride in, which is being a good coach, feels really good. So bit of gratitude there. Now, in terms of what to expect, so this Q&A, ton of questions. I've given you my unfiltered thoughts on all the questions. I've tried to just do it nice and off the cuff. So I stopped doing the Q&As a while back. Generally speaking, I like doing them. I like doing this format. I enjoy it. It feels like I'm giving something back, but also they're fun. You know, they're fairly low preparation, but they're fun. They're good for me. However, they never did particularly well in terms of the views. So I stopped doing the monthly one. You guys might remember I used to do a monthly Q&A. I stopped doing those because they typically don't perform very well. So if you like this, do me a favor, like, hit subscribe, drop a positive comment, and let me know you like this kind of stuff. Because if you do, I might bring back monthly Q&As or something anyway, a little bit more frequently. Now, I didn't get through all the questions because there were a lot. So if this video gets a positive response, I might mop up the rest of the questions at a later date because there's another handful that still need answering. And I'll just say one more thing before we move on to the main part of the video. If you're interested in coaching, there's a link in the description. That's my predominant gig. YouTube is like a nice, fun side thing that I do, but I really love coaching. I'm very good at coaching. So if you're interested in pushing your physique to the next level, let me know, or strength the next level. I also compete competitive powerlifters, strong men, and also bodybuilders. So I can prep people for stage or the platform, whatever your goal, whatever your thing is. Right. And finally, check me out on Boostcamp. Code is Fazlifts. You can sign up with that for a free 2-week trial of premium. That is the best workout app on the market. And I have 4 programs on there. So 3 free ones, 2 of which are beginner programs, right? And one is a HIT low volume program, which is kind of Dorian Yates inspired, like my roots, you know, early 2000s, late 90s roots. And finally, the last one is the Jack's Intellectual, which is my premium program, which has been getting some great feedback, like genuinely really good. And I knew people were going to like it because I've actually done it before with clients. I've been using it with clients for years. The concepts within that program work very, very well. So if you want to check that out, as I say, Codes Fast Lifts, sign up for a premium, support me, run the program. It is supposed to be run for 19 weeks. So go run it, give it a good 19 weeks, and then decide whether you like it or not. But I can promise you, if you run it right, you'll get some good results. Also, there's a ton of documentation with that. There is the most documentation with that program than any program on Boostcamp. I did that, right? Because I care about you guys and I want you guys to succeed. Right. Without further ado, let's get on with the Q&A. Let's begin. In order of popularity, question 1. What's the biggest bro science that you believe in? That was by Lululemon, Michael. Right. So I want to give some context before I give the answer. The reality is I don't actually believe in any bro science. You know, my beliefs, which fuel my coaching, are based on the combination of what I've seen in my coaching experience myself, also what the science says, my interpretation of the science. And I think when you have the current landscape of hypertrophy science is just so varied, you know, if you take an interest in these things, which a lot of people don't, a lot of people just look at what is in front of them on social media. Now, the problem with that is there's a bit of an echo chamber. I've talked about this before. So as a result, you get the dominant views from a select few people. And you would be mistaken for thinking that represents science. So if anything which goes against that is bro science or anti-science, whatever. But as I've sort of broken apart over the last few weeks, that's not the case. So with that said, let me talk you through a couple of things which I believe in, which may not necessarily line up with what you see on social media from certain research celebrities, but actually is well in line with the wider research. And my views generally are in line with the wider research. They might not be in line with these small group of research celebrities who are very, very vocal online. So first one is protein intake. It is, yeah, protein intake. Now, I'll say straight off the bat, this isn't bro science. If you look at the wider body of research, the correct interpretation of the data shows quite clearly we should be eating more than the stated 0.7 grams per pound. Now, there's been some rippling of that recently. So I've been talking about high protein for a while. Probably where I got the most exposure for that was Alex Leonidas' podcast where I said that. And then, a few weeks later, Milo Wolf came out with his little video about higher protein intakes. Now, at the moment, the conversation has mostly been centered around this new study and people analyzing this new study and what it means. I still think we are missing a trick in the evidence-based community, because nobody is still looking at why the original interpretation was incorrect. That was my original interpretation, same as Lyle McDonald. Lots of people have said the same thing. A lot of people have expressed concerns about the 0.7 grams per pound recommendation. They've expressed concerns because it does not reflect an accurate reading of the research. And once again, just quickly go over it. Why would we use a figure which represents only muscle protein synthesis when there are other structures in the body which need protein? Our skin, our nails, our internal organs, it all needs protein. It's not just muscles. And also synthesis. It's not just synthesis, it's also breakdown. We're missing a whole trick here. It's the interpretation of data which is wrong. So this new data that's being focused in on and honed in on, this new study which is being talked about, some people are for it, some people are against it, they're missing the point. And I keep saying this time and time again. Why are we not going back and looking at why we were wrong? Well, say why we were wrong. Why you were wrong. Not my audience. You guys, you listen to me, you know what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Why don't those guys who are now going, ooh, Pikachu face, new research coming out. Oh my God. Why don't you go back and look at how you misinterpreted the old research first? Look at where you made the mistakes. I know Menno's already tried to dispute it. And again, I don't care. It's not about the new research. Why is it always a new study's on this? Look back at the old data. What made you so certain before, and why were you so wrong in being so certain before? Again, like I'm saying, it's not just about muscles. It's not just about synthesis. You have to account for other structures in the body which need protein. And it's also not just synthesis, it's also degradation. You have to account for that. That's why these guys have been basically stealing your gains for the past, 20 years. Hey, I told you the truth. But yeah, that's the first thing. But listen, based on all that, who is the real bro scientist here? Right? Because it's not me. I'd say the real bro scientists are the guys who've been telling you to eat 0.7 grams per pound. Those are the real bro scientists, not me. I was right in line with the science from day one, because I based my recommendations on initially on bodybuilding law, what I had been taught 20 years ago. And then thereafter, from my interpretation of the research, which was in large part aided by Lyle McDonald, who helped me understand all this stuff. So, that's who are the real bro scientists. So you could answer that first question in two different ways. What bro science do I believe in? Well, I guess it depends on what side of the fence you're on. It's your perspective, isn't it? The second one is volume. I think volume is pretty much the same kind of thing. I'm not a believer in super high volumes. And what I will say is, just for perspective on that, I did a piece on volume before, and I think everybody lumped me in the low volume camp. Like, I'm not low volume at all. No, I've given my volume recommendations on this channel many times. If you look at my hypertrophy fundamentals playlist, my general volume recommendations are about 8 to 16. I think that's a good medium. On the lower side, if you're training close to failure, usually lower frequency, because you can get all those 8 sets in one bout per week, and that's pretty good. On the upper side, you probably want to have some RiR in play, and maybe you want to split those up into 2 or 3 sessions. Okay, so you've got a range there that I work in. So what I'm talking about is the volumes which are like 42, 45, 52, all of those studies which people said were legit, but no one actually does. Who really believes in that stuff, And don't give me that nonsense about, oh, it's a specialization phase. Well, again, who's doing it? Who's doing it? It's such a coke. So, oh, yes, well, it's a specialization phase. No, we're not saying that though, are we? Like that's not how it was presented. It was presented as the linear relationship between volume and hypertrophy. Are there any doubts? That was literally the name of the paper. How much more emphatic are these people going to be so that they can then walk it back and go, oh, no, no, no. We never recommend high volumes. Do me a favor. All of those guys who are selling all their books, none of them recommend volume that high. So why are they saying it publicly to you? None of them recommend it in their books. None of them do it. They're telling you that to keep you confused, to keep you wanting more and buying and clicking and liking and all that kind of stuff. They're lying to you. Same with the protein stuff. They're lying to you. They don't give a crap. They don't give a crap about you. Like, wake up to that. So if we're talking about the volume stuff, I'm talking about the excess volume way above, 25, 30, all that kind of stuff. Not a believer in that. Not a believer. I'm not a believer in this endless relationship between volume and hypertrophy. I just think it's nonsense. On that note, I will say again, I am in line with the wider body of research. What you guys see, you've got to understand, you're seeing a very small slither of research from a very small group of vocal bro scientists. So, my views match up with the wider body of research. And if you actually look out there, find people who are outside that little group, no one recommends volumes that high. That's insane. They all recommend volumes right about where I am. You look back at the old Worm Bomb study, which was a classic, right? It was great. Matthias Worm, he's still active, still doing research. That research is solid. But again, it's one of those situations where I would say this is where I differ from what is presented as science from a small group of vocal researchers online. But actually, my views are in line with the greater body of research. Always has been. So, yeah, I guess if it was two things, I would say high volume and protein. But again, that's a very contextual answer. And I would say I'm not the bro scientist here. I, without naming names, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Those are the bro scientists, not me. Not me at all. Like, I've been on the right side of it for a long time because I actually practice what I preach, because I've accomplished things, because I've achieved things, because I've competed. I've been in the arena. I've done it. So I have to know what works. That's how I judge a coach. That's how I judge anybody who's giving out advice. Who are you? What have you accomplished? What have you done? Who have you coached? All that means nothing to me because it's not real. And we know it's not real because, once again, it's just been reneged with the protein stuff. And I don't care about this new study. We still haven't gone back and figured out why they got the original research interpretation wrong. So no, I would say I'm right in line with the research, the correct research. I'd say I'm not in line with the BS. Right. Question 2. Love the channel, Faz. I'm unclear on how you program and progress set to cross, i.e. 3x10 with clients. I like the idea of getting a blend of RiR without having to explicitly worry about RiR each set, but how does this work in practice when working through 6 to 10 range? Okay. This was from John Poe Doseki 6942. Right. Yeah. This was the second most upvoted question. Great question. So yeah, essentially what you want to do is you want to try and start with a weight which lets you hit the top of the range. So, and there's not really a range with this. It's more a static number. You're aiming for 3x10, right? So that's where you start. So let's put some numbers on it. Let's say you got a 100 kilo bench. You can do that for 10, 10, 10. That's where you start, right? Now, when that feels good, when that feels comfortable, and, because again, we're progressing for bodybuilding, so we don't have to go immediately. We'll go when that feels decent. Important point, right? You don't always have to go up in weight. You can just get better. Anyway, so when that feels good enough to go up, you'll go up by 2.5 kilos. So you got 102.5 kilos and you'll see what you get. Quite simple. See what you get. You might get eight, or you might get, we were doing tens, weren't we? Yeah. So you might get 10, 9, 7. Okay, cool. All right. Now, yeah, in that situation, you've got a couple of those sets which are harder than they would be if you're doing 10, 10, 10, because you're closer to failure. Now, I still wouldn't recommend failing, but you've got a bit of variation there. And then what you would do is the week after, you'd stick to 1 or 2.5. Maybe you get 10, 10, 8. Great. Cool. Now we're progressing. You just slowly build it up till you get 10, 10, 10. So over the course of months, you get a range of some sets which are with RAR, some sets which are a lot closer to failure. You need to decide for yourself whether you're actually going to fail or not. I generally don't recommend it if the volume is high, but there is some room to perhaps fail on the final set. And I don't see anything too wrong with that if you want to go down there. Failing at the final set, cool, pretty good. But that's the advantage of the system. It gives you some RAR, it gives you some failure, it lets you see where your limits are, which is cool. You want to train hard, you want to be able to take it all the way every now and again. It's a good system. I think this was kind of lost when the RAR talk came into discussion. Nothing wrong with RAR, it's a legitimate thing. I just think it shouldn't be your entire week. And that's the problem, because when the RAR stuff was originally presented, most RAR advocates generally tell people to just sit at about a 2 RAR year round. Now, that means you never really get the advantage of pushing your limits. And I think that's wrong. Now, there was a brief time where people were kind of obsessed with the whole escalating intensity model that Israel really pushed forward. 6 weeks. Start with manageable volume, go up to volume which is a lot higher, and at the same time increase your intensity too, and try not to get injured. I mean, yeah, volume and intensity going up at the same time is generally not a good idea, guys. So a lot of people got injured doing that. I would not recommend it. But anyway, yeah. So at a point, people were taking things to failure because they were doing that final week before the deload, taken to failure, when volume was at its highest as well. What a stupid idea. So, yeah, my God, talk about like willfully trying to injure people. That's amazing. So anyway, um, sorry, postman. So anyway, like I'm saying, so anyway, right. So I think there were some periods of time where people were trying to mix RAR with failure, but eventually people just settled on 2 RAR year round, and that's when we lost something. I think we lost something in our training. And that just contributes to these scores of people who are never, ever pushing their limits, never going to failure. And I think that's a mistake for the vast majority of people who consume this type of content, which is like beginners to intermediates. Most advanced guys, if they're consuming my content, it's just because they want to say hello and see what I'm doing. They're not looking for ideas on how to train because they know what they're doing. Most guys who consume this content right now who are really looking for answers are beginners to intermediates. You tell that population to always hold back, it's a disaster. They never really learn how to work hard. And also, the worst thing is not about not learning how to work hard. They feel empowered to not work hard. And that's the danger. Because if you tell them, look, you got to work hard, they go, no, I don't. No, I don't. I know better. So hold on a second. I'm sat here looking like I look, freaking yoked 24/7. This guy who's 140 pounds, never accomplished anything in his life, benches 100 kilos, wants to insist and he doesn't need to go to failure and he knows what he's doing. Oh my God, what a disaster. I mean, no skin on my teeth. As long as I'm not coaching him, who cares? But a bit yikes. And again, this is the kind you combine that with a low protein. you guys are fighting an uphill battle if you follow that group of people. So going back to what the question was asking. So that's how you implement it really. It's quite simple. You start off with a static set and reps. 3x10, cool. And you add weight when it's comfortable, you build the reps back up, and you just keep progressing like that. It's super simple. It means over the course of months, you get a variety of RAR and failure or close to failure training. Dead simple. Okay. You don't have to overthink things. You almost don't even have to think about RAR. You just know that theoretically you are getting the benefits, which is cool. Right. And also, I will say on that point, you can do that for 3 sets or 4 sets. I've seen it work well on both ways. Yeah, they both work well. 4 sets are quite nice for even higher volume. Do you know if you go right to 16, works great. And then you've got more chance of getting more sets with an RAR if you do 4 sets across. Okay. The only thing I would say as a caveat with that is make sure you time your rest periods. If you do this approach, timing your rest periods is a must. And on that note, right, can we just, again, this is another area where I disagree with the bro scientists. I'm going to start calling them that now. The bro scientists. Let's just all refer to them as bro scientists. You know what I'm talking about. So this is another area where I disagree with the bro scientists. And I will say this is maybe another area where the bro scientists will catch on eventually. But rest periods, they are a variable because, well, you tell me, is 3x5 with 5-minute rest between sets the same as 3x5 with 1-minute rest? Is it? What about 3x10? 3x10 with 3 minutes rest versus 3x10 with 30 seconds rest. Is that the same? No, of course it's not. So of course training time is a variable we have to control. So if you're doing this RAR, if you're doing my enforced RAR approach, make sure you regulate your rest periods. I don't care how long you take. It's different rest periods have different purposes. You can go lower rest periods for more of a metabolic buildup and provide a different stress. It's fine. It has its place, but the majority of the time your rest period should probably be 2 or 3 minutes. All right. Question 3. Show me gains. What are your thoughts on the future of natural bodybuilding as a sport, considering the IFBB and NPC just made a natural stream? How would you bolster the sport and athletes? Great question. And also check out this guy's Instagram. Dude is yoked, and he does do educational videos every now and again, like little shorts. But yeah, he's got his head on right. So, from what I've seen over the course of the last 25 years, natural bodybuilding's profile has increased dramatically. That's what I've seen. Some of you may not know this, but the only reason I didn't get into bodybuilding when I was a kid was because there didn't appear to be a natural division around where I was. I said didn't appear to be. Maybe there was, but it just wasn't advertised very well. So when I was a young YOLO at 18 years old, I wanted to get competitive in something with this sport that I love doing. I love going to the gym, love getting jacked. The only game in town which was drug-free appeared to be powerlifting. Yeah, there were natural bodybuilders around who competed and whatnot, but it just, as I say, it just seemed very difficult to get information about it at the time. That's why I went to powerlifting. I mean, years later, when I went back to bodybuilding, the transition was very easy for me because I just love competition. I don't really care what competition it is. I mean, I love powerlifting, sure, but really, I love dominating. That's what I want. I love winning. So, yeah, I think in terms of how it's progressing, it's already in a far better place than it used to be. Back when I first started lifting, 99, 2000, bodybuilding was enhanced. There was no natural bodybuilding. It wasn't a thing. You had a few guys, but you didn't see streams and streams and platforms of people filled up with on stage ready. You just didn't see all that. So the profile is definitely a lot better. And I know, for example, the one of the largest federations in England or the UK anyway, is the PCA. They started off as almost exclusively just enhanced, and very quickly they brought in natural leagues, and they have loads of natural competitions now. So the PCA is a legit federation for everyone, whatever your proclivities are. So I see it's already starting to gain popularity. I do think, realistically speaking, it's never going to be as popular as enhanced bodybuilding because you got to understand most people who spectate bodybuilding are not bodybuilders. And that's you go to any bodybuilding show or you compete, you look around the audience. Most of those guys are not competitors. They're just like regular folk. So they're always going to be attracted to the freak shows. Whereas, when you and I are getting inspired by physiques, we look at, the natural lifters and we get inspired because kind of, we want to look like that, right? It's a thing, right? We are in the sport. But for a lot of these guys, that's not part of the reason they're watching. The reason they're watching is the same reason I might watch tennis or Formula One racing or boxing or UFC. I'm a big fan of the UFC. I don't want to fight. No, thank you. But I like the spectacle of it. So, and there's a reason why heavyweight fighters typically draw a larger card than most, smaller divisions. It's the same thing. People want to see bigger spectacles. So unfortunately, this is not just a bodybuilding thing. This is just human nature. I don't think the national federations are ever going to be anywhere near as popular as enhanced bodybuilding because most of the audience just aren't bodybuilders. They're going to want to see the big guys because that's their thing. In terms of enhancing the outlook, I mean, I think social media, what I will say is getting organized means a lot. I competed for a long time with the BDFPA, which is the British Drug-Free Powerlifting Association. Dude, their resources 20 years ago were just so poorly organized. Like for a young guy like me trying to get involved in a sport who didn't know anyone, it was so disorganized. And I will say, just for powerlifting, I've got a couple of powerlifting clients who are competing next year. It's so disorganized. Like the websites are all the same as they were 20 years ago. No one's updated them. There's no one, like just real lack of organization. So what I would like to see is the base level, just more organization, more logical organization. So you can, if you are a young guy coming into the sport who wants to compete naturally, you can see exactly what's going on, a yearly calendar, dates, locations, so you can plan, what's going on. As long as you got it's the admin side of things. It's like with coaching. You can be the best coach ever, but if your onboarding and your resources and your communication is terrible, well, people are gonna have a bad experience. For coaching, your onboarding and your resources and how you present your information is just as important as who you are and what you know. You have to get both sides right. And it's the same with natural bodybuilding. That's where I would begin. That's me. That's my personality. I'm an organization guy. I'm an organization presentation. I want I want people to be clear on what they're doing when they're doing it. They have all the information they need. That's my whole thing. It was when I was a school teacher. It is now when I'm a coach. So I would personally start there. Make sure it's accessible when you look online. Is it all organized? If you want to get involved in a federation, is it clear the routes of how to get involved? Are there no excessive bureaucracies you need to go through to get a card or this or that or whatever? So many things like that is what I'd look at initially, and then just make sure you well advertised online. Yeah. All right. Next question. I'm on a big cut at the moment. I'm 15 kilos down and got probably another 15 kilos to go before I hit my goal weight. Once I'm there, should I immediately bulk or spend a few months at maintenance? Thanks. That's from the Goldfish 123. Thanks for the question. Good question. Very popular one. Yeah, I would say I always get my clients to do 2 weeks at maintenance first. You need to spend some time undoing some of the metabolic adaptations which occur. There are things which happen if you've been on a diet, especially for this for such a long time. So you don't want to go straight into a surplus. I would spend 2 weeks at maintenance and raise your food up, you know. And in terms of calculating maintenance, it doesn't have to be complicated. What I would do is something like take your new body weight, okay, multiply it by 15, new body weight in pounds, right? Multiply it by 15, and then take about 90% of that, to account for some slowdown, 90 to 85, and start there. You'll know very quickly if it's too much or too little. That's kind of roughly what I would do. So let's say you end the cut at, I don't know, let's say 160 pounds times by 15 is 2,400 calories. 90% of that is 2,160. I'd start about there. That's reasonable, in my opinion. And then you can adjust it from there. It's just a starting point. If it's too high, who cares? It's a starting point. If it's too low, who cares? It's a starting point. You know, the starting calories are never that important. What's important is your ability to adjust and adapt to those. So adapt them over the course of the 2 weeks to try and stay roughly at maintenance and then push on from there. Okay. There will be some weight gain because you'll like reglycogenate. So you might gain, you can account for 3 or 4 pounds. That's about it. Aside from that, try and keep your weight relatively steady. Okay. But yeah, 2 weeks, not months, 2 weeks. And then what I would also say is maybe have a strategy or figure out a strategy. Like you can hire me for a consultation. You know, we can talk about it, we can go over it. And I can look at your previous history. I can look at what your body, how your body responds to, refeeding and what you've done in the past in previous cuts and figure out a plan for you. Like what is the next stage? Are you going to spend quite a lot of time at maintenance? Maybe. Are you going to, because the 2 weeks at maintenance is a definite safeguard to avoid any excessive weight regain. But if you're still 200 pounds, 220 pounds, you may not want to go in bulk. You may need to maintain, so there are factors which are involved after that first 2 weeks as well. And that's something where you might want to seek some professional help. As I say, I sell consultation services on my website. Right. Your top 2 or 3 exercises for each body part. Andy's kitchen garden. Thank you, Andy. Okay. Top 2 or 3. That's quite a lot. I'll give you top 2. Let's start from the bottom up. I would say calves, any kind of standing calf raise, and any kind of seated calf raise. Seated calf raises, I personally still think are useful. I don't think they're pointless. Growing I think it's a soleus, gives your calves a much more attractive appearance because it creates a wider calf. This is old bodybuilding law. We all knew this back in the day, but it's been lost. And I don't think you get quite the same level of attention to that area as you do with standing calf raises. It's not true that all you need to train is your gastroc. If you train your gastroc, you're going to get a very thin looking calf. You want a nice, thick, wide calf, which sort of flares out. It's not all about the detail on top. You want to flare away from the ankle. So to give that illusion of a nice full calf, any kind of standing and seated calf raise. Quads, leg extension has got to be up there. Big fan. Okay. And for me, I would say some kind of squat machine, which gives me a full range of motion, because I'm a big believer in range of motion for quads. So I would say something like a hack squat or a belt squat or a pendulum squat. Those two would be my favorites for quads. Again, this is for me personally, hamstrings, big fan of seated leg curls. And after that, yeah, probably just more leg curls, like lying leg curls as a variation. I'm training legs tomorrow, and that's my hamstring routine will be 3 sets of seated, 3 sets of lying. It's a good combination. Moving up, I'm going to skip glutes because I'm not that concerned they get trained incidentally. Let's go to chest. For me, a good incline press is very valuable. The one I'm using at the moment is a prime incline press. I've also used Smith, just in general, Smith machine incline press, probably my favorites. I would probably always defer to pressing rather than like isolation work for the chest. For me, it just seems to work better. Even though I'm very tricep dominant, I still get more growth just from heavy pressing than I do from cable stuff. Having said that, the variation, a seated, back supported cable like crossover is pretty sweet. I use that to warm up my chest on chest day. For back, I mean, weighted chins and bent over rows are absolutely goated. You can't, they're great. If you can perform them, they're fantastic. But yeah, in terms of other vertical pulls that I'm using, I think a machine pullover, like a hammer strength machine pullover, they're pretty sweet. And for rows, I generally prefer chest supported rows myself personally. I find on that note, bent over rows, they get a lot of love from guys who don't deadlift very much or very often. But in general, I was always quite a big deadlifter when I was coming up. So I never really wanted to waste lower back recovery on bent over rows. So I would do a lot of chest squat rows. My back's mostly built from deadlifts, weighted chins, and chest supported rows. All right, shoulders for me, probably some kind of lateral. Like I like a lying cable lateral, you know, with cuffs, pretty sweet. But also pressing, some kind of pressing would be nice. Um, well, I'll say with pressing with the caveat, assuming you have recovery for it. This is what I've always said. I, this is something I've been misquoted many times as well, right? I've never not recommended the overhead press. What I've said is there are recovery concerns with the tricep and the shoulder if you do a lot of benching. You got to be cognizant of that. And a lot of people aren't. So, yeah, if you have recovery capacity, then an overhead press too, maybe with dumbbells. Uh, biceps. Well, for buys, I've had a lot of good results over the last couple of years with just regular dumbbell curls, just done super heavy. So that's been pretty cool. I like those. They're tough. You know, they're a tough exercise. I got up to doing 25s, and it's a really tough exercise. 25 kilos. So what is that? Like 55 pounds in each hand. So yes, regular dumbbell curls. Apart from that, just some lighter isolation work. Maybe some kind of single arm machine curl, something like that, like an Atlantis machine curl. For triceps, for me, push downs are great. And aside from that, compounds for triceps, the close grip bench, weighted dip, goats. I think that's about everything. I'm not going to cover all the little ones, but there you go. It's my preference anyway. But the reality is, you've got to find your own. None of this is set in stone. Training muscles once a week or more frequently for those over 40. That is from Far Beyond Driven 86. That is not a question, but it did get voted 6 times. Is it a question or is it a statement? What's going on? Training muscles once a week or more frequently. So I guess the question is, should you train them once a week or more frequently over 40? Okay. So I think rather than talk about frequency, we need to firstly establish, can you give a good stimulus in one session with, say, half the volume? So for example, let's say you're doing 6 sets one day, 6 sets the next day. Before we talk about frequency, are you able to deliver a good stimulus in those sets? Like, can you do it? You know, especially if you match that with everything else you might be doing during the course of the week. Like, are you able to deliver a good stimulus? This is not just about, it's not just about the weekly volume. A lot of what has been given to you by the bro scientists. Love that term. That's great. You know what I'm talking about. You know, a lot of those guys have been recommending you look at things in terms of a weekly volume. I don't think that's the best way to look at things. Personally, I think it's a better way to look at things in terms of per bout stimulus, not the totality, because per bout, you have to give a good stimulus to grow. Like, I'll give you an analogy. This analogy I got from, Samuel Buckner, Dr. Samuel Buckner. It's a pizza analogy, right? He says, it's a really good analogy. He says, if you were to warm up a pizza, like you have a frozen pizza, if you do warming up a pizza on Monday, but you only warm it up part way, right? And then you come back Wednesday and you warm up again, and it's still only warmed up part way. And Friday you come in and warm it up again, but again only a little bit. It's still only warmed up part way. So at no point during the course of the week have you actually got a fully ready, heated, ready to eat pizza. Because all you've done is you've tickled it on Monday, you've tickled it again on Wednesday, you've tickled it again on Friday. It's gone cold in that time. That's the same with hypertrophy stimulus. It doesn't matter about the overall weekly stimulus. Like, yeah, maybe the pizza was in the oven for half an hour across the week. The reality is you've still got a stone cold pizza. It hasn't really been given the time to reach peak status yet. It hasn't been cooked. It's the same with the muscles. There's no point talking about, well, I'm doing 15 sets a week. Well, yeah, but if you haven't actually provided a reasonable stimulus within that one session, you've accomplished nothing. Doesn't matter if you trained, like a common one is training the back, God knows, 6 times a week. Yeah, well done. You train the back 6 times a week. Your intensity is crap. Your back is small. Well done. You got fooled by the bro scientists. Congrats. Also, you're probably eating low protein. And training 2 RL. Gains gone. So yeah, I think it's better to look at things. It's a tangent there. So I think it's better to look at things in terms of, are you delivering the stimulus per session? So with this, training muscles once a week or more frequently, can you deliver a good stimulus in the time you have? Okay, that's important. And the next thing is, are you, if you can do this multiple times a week, can you recover in terms of your joints? I found when I was younger, my joints weren't really a concern. I trained, I recovered, done. Everything recovered together. My joints, my nervous system, my muscles, everything recovered together. But as I got older, the difference in time of recovery between my muscles and my joints became more and more exaggerated. So I needed more time. So for me, it was more a case of training less frequently. But that's a consideration for you as well. If you have to pick a frequency where your joints are able to recover. Okay. So there's no hard and fast rule with that. You have to figure it out. Sorry. Next question. Longer arms take obviously a longer time to get them jacked looking. If arms were a priority for you or a weak point, would you approach your training plan different if you had long arms, or do they grow even better with big compounds like bench, pull-ups versus short arms? Yeah, yeah. In general, I think you should get quite a lot of growth stimulus if you have longer arms, because you're you're always going to get more triceps, certainly from your pressing, always. Um, Yeah, I think if you're a long arm guy and you bench like really wide like this, you're going to run into problems with your shoulders sooner, probably rather than later. So you're probably naturally going to veer in a little bit more than a barrel chested guy. So yeah, you are going to get more tricep. Pulling, probably going to get more bicep, especially if you start to mix in some things like weighted chins with an underhand grip. It's great for the biceps. So yeah, I would first of all, if I was creating a priority, I wouldn't look at adding in a bunch of work. There are two steps I would take first before adding in a bunch of work, isolation work. Because the usual tactic is just add in more volume, add in more frequency. I just think that's the wrong way to go. First tactic is bias your compounds to your arms. So more narrow grip benching, more close grip chins or underhand grip chins. That's immediately going to start to target your arms more while you're doing compounds. That's the first thing to do. Then the next thing is look at the execution and the intensity of your arm work. Are you training them hard? You might not be. That's something to look at. A lot of people struggle with intensity on arm work. They think they are. They want to, but if you look at their sets, they don't look intense. A lot of people have a real hard time struggling with just a single joint exercise. You have to learn to really struggle with single joint exercises. And I think one more thing, exercise selection. You maybe want to find exercise which fit you. Maybe the exercise which you've been avoiding. And I'll say in today's current climate where the bro scientists are feeding you a lot of misinformation, I love that. A lot of people are avoiding big, heavy, basic exercises like barbell curls, dumbbell curls, exercises which built big arms for decades. A lot of people are avoiding them because they're more in favor for exercises where they can feel the stretch and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a mistake. I think it's a real big mistake. Heavy barbell curls, heavy dumbbell curls, heavy close grip bench, they've all built dips. They've all built big arms over decades. Just because they don't give you a stretch doesn't mean anything. They're still useful. You need loading. You need the loading. I think you do need some stretch work. And I also think you need some squeeze work as well. I think you need it all. So if you're only ever doing the lengthened stuff, the stretch stuff, and you're not getting the results, and all you're doing is piling up more and more volume because that's the answer, apparently, you're probably always going to be small. Just the way it is. But hey, you've only got yourself to blame. you listen to the wrong people. So make sure you're respecting bodybuilding law and history. Use time-proven exercises. And just for the record, if any one of you thinks that when I was locking out 400-pound bench presses, if any one of you thinks for a second that the long head of my triceps wasn't firing maximally, you need help. Just to let that sink in. Just remember what you're saying. If you say close grip benches, pressing, arms at your side doesn't build a long head, just extrapolate that out. You're saying 400-pound benches are locked out by the itty bitty medial triceps there. You've been brainwashed by bro scientists. Next one. I know this might be a minor detail, but I'm interested in knowing if there are any benefits in doing a greater variety of exercises with fewer sets each compared to doing fewer exercises with more sets per exercise. So, a question by Ben. It's not a minor detail. It's a really good question. It's a very, very good question. Yeah, there is a difference. Generally speaking, generally speaking, more sets gives you more practice at an exercise, and that can be one viable avenue to gain strength. And it's useful, you know. If 2 sets of an exercise, let's say a top set, back off set approach, you compare that to 4 sets of my Enforced RiR approach, you're going to get more motor learning, more practice on the movement with 4 sets of that exercise. Even if you're doing, let's say 12 sets total, if you're doing 12 sets across 3 exercises, you have a far better chance of improving on those 3 exercises. Despite what people will tell you, you will, because you're practicing more. It's not that different from practicing tennis and your backhand. Like, yeah, we're building muscle, but there is also a practice element as well. And that is particularly true when it comes to exercises which are very heavily dependent on practice, like the bench press. The bench press in particular, this kind of training is crucial. If you're in that kind of intermediate dead zone where you're benching, say, anything roughly about 2 plates or less even, you need more work on barbell benching. Same with overhead pressing. If you're trying to build the overhead press, you need to press more. So for that purpose, more sets with fewer exercises is going to be infinitely better. Now, at a certain point, you're going to be so advanced that you're not going to need 3, 4, whatever sets per exercise. Then you can afford to have more variety that will help to prevent you from burning out. But it's an advanced strategy. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone who's not advanced. You know, like when you're advanced, you may pick 2 sets for the first exercise, which is more of a warm-up exercise. Like, let me run you through an example advanced chest session. That first exercise might be 2 sets of a cable crossover. Warm you up, isolate the pecs. Okay. Next exercise might be 2 sets where you do a heavy press. Let's say a heavy incline press, top set, back off set. Great. Then another 2 sets where you work in a slightly higher rep range with sets across, with, say, a machine chest press. Yeah. Maybe an emphasis on the stretch there. And the final exercise might be 1 or 2 sets with an intensity technique. Maybe just one myo-rep set of pec deck or something to really focus on the stretch and the squeeze and really get those high reps into play. You've got there 7 or 8 sets across 4 different exercises, which represent a lot of variety, not overemphasizing one in particular, because that might burn you out. And it might stress your tendons more than you want to. You have that variety. That's what an advanced chest session would look like, because you're taking advantage of different rep ranges, different ways of training, different rest periods. Yeah. And then there's a purpose to those exercises. You're not just piling volume upon volume upon volume. There's a purpose to what you're doing there. There's a plan. There's warm-ups. There's big hitters. There's high rep work. There's all that stuff. Now, when you're an intermediate, it's more about more volume, more practice, and that's one avenue for getting more weight on the bar. You're not going to be able to exert the level of force in one and focus in one set which an advanced guy is. You're just not. So you need more sets of an exercise to really damage you. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. Years ago, when I used to train, working every now and again with my powerlifting coach, a guy called Tom Martin, and we'd be deadlifting together. I would be doing 200 kilos ish, like 220 kilos ish for sets and reps on the deadlift. And I would normally do multiple sets and reps, like 3 to 4 sets, whatever, right? While I was doing that, he would work up to one set. Now, his one set was over 300 kilos, right? So he did my weights and then he carried on going up. I stayed behind, he carried on going up. So a more advanced guy is going to be able to go that much higher in terms of poundages and inflict that much more damage, not just with that one set, but also on the way up. I mean, make no mistake, if you're a 300, well, what is he, 400 kilo deadlifter, that's with 350 and 320, it's still going to damage you. Like, there's no way the human body can lift 320 kilos multiple times without getting something. So the more advanced you get, the more even the warm-ups will take it out of you, and then the work sets as well. So you need less. You can just do more damage with each set. Also, another reason why, as you're advanced, your volume should go down, not go up. Anyway, next question. How would you progress a dumbbell flat bench as your main lift if your reps are stalled and the next dumbbell tier is 5 kilos up, i.e. 52.5 to 57.5? The heavier dumbbells at my gym make these 5 kilo jumps. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Same with mine. And of course, if you get strong in the 15 to 20 range, you can probably hoist the next big tier up. But just interested in what other strategies you would use. Maybe really slow eccentrics or try to get stronger on inclines, etc. Okay. All right, cool. Also, congrats on 10K. Incredible information as always. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I'm even reading up on Casey Butt's HLM routines. I don't think many people other than you mention his name. No, they don't. They don't. And it's a shame because Casey was a juggernaut, you know, of information. I wish he was around today. He's not dead. Right? Said that in a really weird way. He's not dead. At least I don't think he is. I just mean he's kind of just shunned, social media. Hopefully he's doing well for himself, whatever he's doing. Yeah. So listen, a couple of options. You already mentioned going to a higher rep range, and that's a good option. You could also just do a regression. So you could start to have some of the sets with your feet up. So turn it into more of a Larson press. It's not a bad idea. An incline you mentioned as well. It's not a bad idea. So I would probably look at do something like that. But the other thing that I do is I just weight slam very comfortable with it. That's all. Just once I've maxed out the rep range, let's say I've got to the point where I'm doing sets of 12, all sets across time rest periods, and it feels really easy. Well, I might just stick with it for a while, like 1 or 2 more weeks, just to make it feel really easy, and then go up. And then I'm probably okay. So that's what I would do. That's what I would do. You just give yourself some leeway with that in terms of how quickly you go up. Remember, when it comes to double progression, like I really think double progression should be renamed triple progression, because for bodybuilding, it's not just about the weight and the reps. It's also the quality. The quality can improve. That's the third variable. I mean, you could also argue rest periods. Well, actually, no. That's one more thing you could do. Rest periods. Tighten up your rest periods. Yeah. So let's say, for example, 52.5s, you got them for 3 sets of 8. Okay, cool. And then you slowly build up to 3 sets of 10. Okay. Now, what I would then do is time your rest periods. Let's say you take 3-minute rest periods. Well, spend maybe 2 months taking that down to 90 seconds, slowly knocking off a bit of time. And that's hard. That's really hard. Now, once you get 3 sets of 10 with 90-second rest, and it's exponentially hard because after the first set, you got fatigue going to the next set, then you got fatigue going to the next set. So it's exponentially hard to do that, right? You need a lot of strength to do that. Once you've done that, then you're able to go up easy and then relax the rest periods again. Again, rest periods, they're an untapped variable. Rest periods and quality. You have so many, as a bodybuilder, you've got so many options. It's not just about the reps or the weight. Rest periods and quality are training variables. Let's all agree that they are. Yeah. Okay. That was from Yakuza Goon, by the way. Thank you. Next question. Again, thank you, Faz, and congrats on your achievement. What do you mean by burning out in certain rep ranges, and how do you identify how long before that happens in order to benefit from these movements or rep ranges that burn you out? Okay, so there's two questions, right? So when it comes to this, let me give you some context to what he's asking. I've said in the past, you want to try and include higher reps and higher reps and higher volume, as well as low reps and low volume across the year, as part of a training plan. And there's two different ways you can do that. You can do that all in one, okay, which I gave an example of earlier when I was talking you through an advanced chest routine. Some light work, some heavy work, some metabolic work, mix it all up. That is a good way to do it. You could also do that if you're doing an upper, lower, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So yeah, you could do that. But the other way you could do it is with blocks. Now, what I will say is more than likely, you should probably stick to the main method for the majority of the time. Mix in some higher volume, higher rep work every now and again. But that might be like once a year, for a month or two. I'm not saying alternate month by month or every 6 weeks or block by block. Like, for God's sake, do not do that. Like, remember, the bottom line is still progression. Still progression. Now, in terms of when to know when to switch, you'll feel burnt out. Like with the lower reps, with the lower volume, let's say you're predominantly doing reps of 6 to 10. At a certain point, it'll just feel like hell on the joints. You'll just feel things are so heavy. You're so wired to lifting heavy. Your joints end up taking so much of the load because you're just so efficient at training in that range. It'll just start to wreck you. Your joints will feel terrible, and you'll be like, right, I'm getting nothing from this anymore. And I'm not suggesting you have to get a pump, but like, you'll just start to not get a good pump as well. And I think when things are moving towards that direction and you've stalled in weight progression, it's a good time to mix it up. When it comes to the higher volume stuff, you'll know because you'll just stop getting a good pump, and progression, obviously progression is the main thing. Progression will dry up, but you won't get such a great pump with the higher volume, higher rep stuff. And I think that's a good sign. And again, look, just to clarify, I'm not suggesting the pump means anything. What I'm saying is, at a certain point, you can get so efficient with a certain training style, it's probably a good idea to mix it up to give you a better stimulus. But if you do all of it year round, that's not really viable. You can just carry on. One of my training guys at the moment is doing an a specially devised upper lower that I put together, which has 2 heavy days, upper lower heavy, upper lower light, and upper lower medium. And he does that over a course of 10 days. Works very well. And you don't need variation for that because you have variation built in. You don't need blocks. So all I'm saying is you should vary the stimulus at a certain point. It becomes useful. But I'll also say it's not something you want to mess around with before you need it, Again, quite a lot of you guys are asking questions, or the ones who are looking for information. You're probably in that beginner to intermediate phase. You might not need this at all. So I'll just say once again, if you're still progressing, keep doing it. The pump doesn't mean much, if anything, against poundage progression. So please don't mistake what I'm saying as, right, change your stuff because you're no longer getting a pump. If you're still able to add weight to the bar, you're still getting bigger, okay? Because that's proof. Next question is from the same guy. How do we add new exercises to manage weak points? For example, do we reduce the overall volume of every exercise equally, or start the new exercises on low volume, or replace the previous exercise? I would replace an exercise. Yeah. Replace for sure. Replace. Replace. Because I don't think the reason I say replace is I don't think the first solution towards fixing weak points is adding volume. I think very often, more often than not, it's an execution problem. It's not a volume problem. People just aren't training right. And that's not a diss. It's just the truth. You just don't see it. The vast majority of people just don't train that well or that hard or that precise. Most high-level bodybuilders are not doing tons and tons of volume. They all reduce their volume because they're all precise. You have to try to get to that point as best you can. Mimic that where, before you get to that point. So I would replace, I would not add, because the solution is not necessarily to add more and more and more. I don't think that's the best solution for most people looking to increase a weak point. I think it's a range of exercise selection, intensity, execution. And, intensity and execution are two different things. You can work hard, but it not be directed correctly. So you've got to have it all. And that's, I think, a much better way to look at things. All too often people resort quickly to the more volume. And I think it's a bit of a cop out. Right. Uh, as I suspected, this will probably be across multiple recording sessions. Been an hour. I'm going to take a break. I've got some other work to do, and I'll be back. All right. So recording part 2 now. So getting on with the next question. Would like to know more in depth about the Enforced RiR approach in relation to the Jacked Intellectual Program. Do you apply this with 5 marks of progression, or do you do it for everything else? That's the question from Max Hyde. Right. So with regards to what it is, I explained it earlier on. So go back to the timestamps and check it out. But with regards to the Jacked Intellectual Program, yeah, you would apply it for absolutely everything, because you've got to look at the context. It is a routine with a higher level of volume. Because it's a higher level of volume, you want to have some type of restriction put into play with regards to intensity. You can't just go all out on everything. So yeah, I would recommend using the Enforced RiR approach on everything in that program. Next question. So we got, hey Faz, how do you program an upper lower push pull legs? Do you put more volume on the push pull legs part than the upper lower part for each body part, and deal with the uneven recovery between chest and back if you do that? So I'll answer the first part first. Yeah, that's kind of how I would do things. You're going to naturally have more volume in the push pull legs part. So what happens is the upper lower ends up becoming just like a collection of everything, essentially. That's what it is. So yeah, you get this natural periodization of volume across the week, which actually works pretty well for recovery. My recommendation is on the upper part and the lower part of the upper lower, have more of the big basic compound kind of lifts. And then with the push pull legs, you can add in a little bit more isolation. He goes on to say, and what do you think about upper lower, chest, back, arms, and shoulders, legs split as an alternative with more volume on the chest and back at arms, shoulders, day? No, I don't like that at all. You're hitting the shoulders extremely frequently, and also the elbow extensors very, very frequently as well. I don't, by and large, like that split at all. If you're doing chest and back, arms and shoulders and legs, or if you're doing like a torso limbs, for the record, I do not like that split at all. More often than not, that's going to lead to elbow issues. So unless you are very robust or a beginner, do not do that. And even if you are very robust and a beginner, there are far better options. So no, unequivocally, torso limbs, not a fan. In my experience, from who people I've spoken to, that is the elbow tendonitis, or at least shoulder tendonitis split. Avoid. Right. Next question. Right. Congrats, Faz. My question is, if bulking cutting cycles are necessary, as in people, when they reach around 20% body fat, they cut, can they perhaps reach 20% and maintain and still make gains, or is reaching 20%, then cutting back and going up around 20% a much better approach? That's from D_Sakak. Thank you very much for the question. So this question really all about bulking and cutting, and about the efficacy of bulking and cutting versus recomps. Now, I will say this, and also I would say this question is about recomping at a higher body fat level. Not that 20% is high, because it's not. So anyway, let's just handle bulking, cutting versus just maintaining. I think if you are 20% body fat, absolutely, you've got enough body fat on your frame where you can recomp. However, you're 20% body fat at 150 pounds, you're not recomping into your final form. The bulk cut versus recomp or main gain kind of conversation really falls down when it comes to looking at the individual specifics. I mean, like everything in this channel, it's all a case of nuance, you know? And let me explain the nuance. So if you're drastically underweight, you need bulks. You may well need aggressive bulks. Traditionally, that's how guys have added muscle onto their frames, you know? it's all well and good having a theory of saying, right, we all should maintain or do these really slow bulks. But if that's not how you built the majority of your mass, and you're an influencer who's developed a lot of muscle by heavy bulking, and you go back now and go to everyone in the audience, oh, well, no, you shouldn't do bulks like I did. You should do lean bulks and like small bulks or main gain. You're doing your audience a disservice because it is not reflective of reality. Like, I don't care what great ideas you might have about maintenance or main gaining. If you're an influencer telling everyone to do the exact opposite of what you had experience doing and what worked for you, and you're saying that way doesn't work for some reason, like, you're doing your audience a disservice. So I would say for people who need to gain weight, like, they need to bulk. So it's less about body fat, but it's more about where your weight is. So the context really, the question is a good question, but I think what's more relevant than the body fat percentage is really where your weight is. Like this question we've got here, going up to 20%, going down to 10%, whatever. That's That's fine. But if you're really underweight, you need a big, long bulk and you may need 10 months of bulking rather than 10 pounds, more like 20 pounds or 30 pounds. You know, that's going to be more like it's going to move the needle. And that's how you get the job done. So, yeah, I still believe bulking and cutting is necessary within the right context. However, what I'll say is the recent controversy about bulking and cutting, whether it's necessary or not, a lot of that is coming from one, people who overly look at the science, but two, is being accepted by people who have forgotten this, who've built their muscle mass, and now they're looking back thinking, ah, man, that was painful. Like, well, yeah, there's no easy way around it. There's no easy way to be an advanced lifter. It hurts. That's the reward you get for walking around jacked is you've been through all that. You can't short circuit the system. Okay. Also, I will say with regards to the P ratio, because I think we want to touch on that question a little bit here as well, within the context of this answer. With regards to the P ratio, I think it has been proven that the P ratio is kind of not really a thing, for people who train with a reasonable body fat percentage. I used to put a lot more weight into being lean before you bulk up. Now, I think it's good to have some room to bulk. However, I don't necessarily think if you get overly fat that it's going to impair your muscle building. What I think happens is guys who are overly fat, they don't tend to put on muscle very well, but it's not for the P ratio reason. Can anyone guess? What do you guys think? If guys who are already quite fat and they're trying to bulk, they're going to get fatter and fatter. Does anyone know why that is? And it's not to do with the P ratio. What it's to do with is the crap eating habits that got them to being overweight is what's going to prevent them from gaining more muscle because they don't know how to eat. Now, no one likes to say that because it's not very PC. It's not very nice, but it's the facts. That's why big fat guys typically don't bulk very well, as they don't know how to eat. Bulking, people who know what I'm about to say next. People who know this is true, right? Bulking is a lot harder than cutting. Cutting's easy. And this is from a former fat guy. Cutting's easy. Cutting is just restriction. Bulking is hard. There's very little reward, very little immediate reward. You got to eat a lot of food, a lot of clean food all the time. It's not the same as binging. Okay, so don't think, oh, bulking's easy. No, actual properly performed bulking. You can call it lean bulking, whatever you want to call it, but bulking, lean bulking is the same thing. Properly performed bulking is more difficult than cutting. And that's why fat guys just end up getting fatter because they don't have their diet habits in check. Hasn't got a great deal to do with P ratio, I don't think anymore, but I see the phenomenon all the time. It might not be to do with P ratio, but it's certainly to do with the diet habits. Right. That was from D Sakak. Thank you very much for the question. Next question. Does pulling and pressing strength could be very influenced because the body structure and leverages? Short answer, yes. But quick follow up to that, who cares? Who gives a shit? No, seriously, who cares? Why do you care? I've got longer limbs, shorter torso. I shouldn't be very good at benching. I bench 4 plates. I didn't care. Why do you care? Those are your genetics. Those are things you're born with. Doesn't matter. Could it be very influenced by body structure and leverages? Yeah. So don't talk like that. Like that's failure talk. Don't talk like that. It's failure talk. Not on this channel. Next question. Congrats, Faz. Thank you. My question is, how much protein intake plays a role in fitness? If someone is unable to meet even the minimum 1 gram per pound, would the impact be mainly on the muscle mass or are strength levels also affected? What would your advice be to someone who's unable to meet the protein requirements for the foreseeable future? Brother, listen, you've got to do what you can. Listen, when I was a school teacher, I taught a lot of students from the ages of 11 to 18. Okay. Some of my favorite year groups were the younger years. I thought they were great, because I was a computer science teacher. So basically, for the younger year groups with computer science, you just program computer games and then you play them. It was great. I used to love it. And everyone used to love coming to my class. It was just a lovely atmosphere. And those little kids, they're like age 11 and 12, right? Um, they'd be presented with me being quite big, and that can be quite intimidating. And like one of the things they used to ask me was, "Sir, what if we don't finish the work?" Relaxed. Just do your best. I used to say that all the time. Just do your best. And I would ask them, "Look, are you giving it a good shot?" They're like, "Yes, sir, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are." you know, um, not used to seeing a school teacher look like that coming from primary school, when it's all kumbaya. And I was like, "Listen, relax. Don't worry about it. Just do your best." And in this situation, I say the same thing to you. Listen, if it's not on the cards, just do your best. That's all you can do. That's all you can ever do in life. When your back's against the wall, all you can do in life is do your best. And that's all I expect from you, my audience. Just do your best. Okay? That was from, I can't read the name, but thank you for the question. Next question. We all know the strength standards for the big three, but do you have strength standards for other very common exercises outside of them, like dips, pull-ups, dumbbell rows, bicep curls, pullovers? Yeah, it's a good question. What I'll say with regards to dumbbells, what we used to say is dumbbells should equal about 80% of the barbell. That was kind of the golden rule for dumbbells. Um, so, for example, if you bench 100 kilos, you may be roughly in the region of about 40 kilo per hand dumbbell bench. See what I mean? Because 2 times 40 is 80, which is 80% of 100. So something like that. I think with regards to dips and pull-ups, I don't know. You'd probably be looking. It's body fat dependent, But I'm assuming you are reasonably lean, like 10 to 20%. You're probably looking at about 3 plates for dips, maybe 2 for pull-ups, for good form for reps. Um, Bicep curls, I always thought a decent bicep curl was about 50 kilos, 110 pounds. Pullovers, I've got no idea. Um, and dumbbell rows, I think rowing 50-kilo dumbbells is a pretty respectable level of strength. Okay. But strict. I don't mean lifting like a power builder or just lifting like a idiot. Just properly perform dumbbell rows. Okay, next question from Texan. Congrats, best channel out there. Thank you. Question: how to recover rehab from injuries, specifically hamstring and pec injuries? Yeah, so my method, which I won't go over now, but what I'll do is I'll just ask you to Google Fazlifts injury rehab. My method is a method which just works really well. So I would look up that video, okay, follow that protocol for 3 months. That is what you need. Anytime you're hurt, follow the protocol in that video. Like that has the best chance of rehabbing you, particularly if it's a minor connective tissue injury or a muscle injury, especially if it's a muscular tear. It's very good for muscular tears. It can be pretty good for connective tissues as well, because it provides you with everything you need. So in that video, I lay out a protocol. Initially, you want to rest for 1 or 2 weeks just to let any sharp pain dissipate, and then start to follow the rehab protocol. I promise you, it's the best protocol for injuries of this nature. It might not always work because some injuries just aren't rehabable, need surgery, but generally, if it's gonna work, that will do it. It's a protocol which originates from the 60s. It's that old, but a lot of people don't know their history, so that is the history of the sport right there, and it works. Congrats, Faz. Truly deserved. I love the upper lower split. Was wondering how to make it less cluttered on upper, and if it's possible to make it more arm biased. That's a question from Matt Sampley. Thank you very much. So, what I will say unequivocally, most people do not know how to program upper lower. Yeah, they don't. What they try to do is they try to do an equal amount of arm work for like chest and back work, which is just ridiculous. If you're going to include, say, 6 sets for chest, 6 sets for back, then 6 sets for arms and biceps, and 6 sets for triceps, you're way overdoing it. Your elbows are going to be trashed. So the way to correctly perform an upper lower is to have half the volume of bis and tris, because you're getting plenty of pushing and pulling indirectly from your chest and back work. If you want to make the upper lower more arm biased, then select your pushing and pulling exercises to reflect that. So your pushing can be close grip benching. Yeah, your main push could be a close grip bench, and it could also be a dip. If you're doing an upper exercise, if you're doing an upper day, and your first exercise is a close grip bench, like a medium grip bench with your elbows tucked, and your secondary exercise is a weighted dip, triceps are going to get plenty of work, and so is your chest, your shoulders, everything else. And conversely, for the back work, you could do a underhand chin up, weighted, lots of bicep work. And you could follow that with some kind of row, which is also underhand and bicep based. That is how you correctly do an upper lower and bicep to arms. The people who complain about upper lowers saying there's not enough arm work or whatever, or the upper body is too cluttered, inevitably, every single time I look into how they program upper lowers, they don't know what they're doing. Most of the guys who say that, you look at their lower body days, because they like to put a bunch of stuff on lower days. And the lower body days, they don't even include calf work or ab work. And they include a pitiful amount of back and leg work. And I just think to myself, that is just a lazy way of having your entire week full of upper work. It's a routine for lazy people. So that interpretation is. But if you do the upper lower correctly, it should be a good but not unmanageable amount of work, and it should be perfectly split between uppers and lowers. Again, people don't know how to program things correctly. They ignore body parts like calves and abs, and they go, "Oh, Pikachu face. I wonder why the upper day is overloaded and the lower day isn't." Well, because you missed off half the lower body day. Right. Next question. Congrats. What is your opinion of asynchronous splits in terms of recovery for legs? That's from Temia, I think. Yeah, really good. I use them quite a lot. I use, in particular, push-pull legs on an asynchronous split. So if you put together a push-pull legs, I have a video, by the way, about push-pull legs, a free push-pull leg split. So feel free to look it up. Look up Fazlifts push-pull legs. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan. So put together a good push-pull legs, run that by training 4 or 5 times a week. You get a frequency of about 4 to 5 days, every body part about 4 to 5 days. And because there's minimal overlap, it works out very, very well. Frequencies of 4 to 5 days suit people down to the ground if they're not able to recover from a twice a week training. So if upper lower, even correctly executed, is getting to be a bit too much, the next step is to do an asynchronous push-pull leg split, which has you training a body part roughly every 4 or 5 days, up from every 3.5. So yeah, it's a good split. I'm a big fan. Next question from Luca Miltos. What's your favorite PR? Probably, you know what? It's probably the bench. Yeah, probably the bench, because I was never that good at bench. I stalled. I'll tell you a little story. Even though we're in a rush, but I'll tell you a little story. Second year in training, I stalled on a 90-kilo bench. Okay. And I was stalled for like 2 or 3 years. And at the time, I was heavily involved in this online community called like the Hard Gainers, right? Don't ask, right? And I asked the higher ups in that community at the time, and they told me, "Look, you've reached your genetic limit." They told me you've reached your genetic limit. That's what they told me. After 2 years of training, benching 90 kilos for a single, they told me you've reached your genetic limit. They said, "Look, we're out of ideas. We don't know what to do. You've reached your genetic limit." That's what they told me as a young 19-year-old with a 90-kilo bench press. Now, I left that community I went on to bench twice that amount in my lifetime, 180 kilos. And it was a very gratifying moment for me um, because I proved them wrong. So that was my favorite PR. Right. Next question. Congrats. Well deserved. My question is, if you could start all over with the knowledge you have now, what would you do differently at the beginner, intermediate, advanced stages? Not generic advice, but what would you personally have done differently? That's from I Just Lift. He's an ex-client of mine. Really nice guy. Thank you for the question. What would I have done differently? I think the big thing that I would have done differently earlier on is pay more attention to diet. So I think I did the right things as a beginner because I bulked heavily. So I bulked very heavily as a beginner. Before my first official year at the gym, I dropped 50 pounds through cardio and some minimal training at a local fitness center. But then my first year in a proper gym, I bulked 40 pounds and I gained a tremendous amount of muscle and strength. So the beginner phase of diet was enough to do what I wanted it to do. I mean, yeah, it was not a perfect bodybuilding diet at all, but it was a lot of food, a lot of calories, a lot of protein, and it worked. Now, at that point, from intermediate to advanced, I would have made far better use of actually looking at diet in the way that I look at it now. I would have gotten a lot more serious about diet and learned my craft rather than just endlessly discuss training and optimize training, which I think it's only half the equation. So that's what I would have done differently right from the beginning. I feel like I would have got bigger sooner. I feel like I would have avoided injuries as much as I did. Obviously, it's not a perfect system because when you get as strong as I got, things are going to break. But I would pay more attention to diet, and I think that would be far more deterministic for my outcomes than really anything else I would waste my time on, such as training, talk, or whatever else. So yeah, that's what I'd do. Next question. I don't know if you expressed your thoughts on this, but what do you think of the morality of using steroids as opposed to purely practical consequences? Do you agree with GVS that it's mostly a personal decision, or do you agree with NH that steroids should be stigmatized completely? Wow, was not expecting this question. Okay, so good one. I think it's a personal choice. Um, I actually don't. I'm not aware of GVS's opinions on steroid use. I don't know if that's his. I'm not saying GVS said that. I'm just reading out the question. And I'm also not saying NH said that. I'm just reading out the question. I talked to both those guys behind the scenes, but I'm not aware of their views on steroids. Um, what I will say is, I think as a whole, steroids need education. Going back to my background as a school teacher, um, if you tell somebody just no, like if they ask you for information, they ask you, look, I want to do this. How do I do it safely? And you just say to them, no, don't. You're an idiot. Don't do it. And if you do it, you're going to die and it's on you. You know what's going to happen? They're not going to not do it. They're going to find somebody who's going to tell them it's okay. Like that, by giving people answers like that, all you do is you force them to go to other avenues of education. This is why there's there's so many steroid gurus online, because you can't go to your doctor. You can't go to a medical professional and ask them, like, look, listen, I'm going to do this. How do I do it safely? So as a result, what popped up over the years is any number of clinics and YouTube channels which are devoted to educating people on how to do things safely. Now, sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't get it right, you know? So it's unregulated. But that's the thing. The government, certainly any government as a whole, has taken the stance that, look, these things are bad, outlaw, don't do them, that will ensue. And I think that is not the way to stop people from taking steroids. The way to stop people is actual real education, because a young guy or an old guy, whoever it is, who wants to take stuff, they're not going to accept that answer. They're going to take it regardless. And they might get their information from someone who's more reckless. So my thoughts are, it is a personal choice. But I think there needs to be a lot more education in the space for people who do want to do it in the safest way possible. And I know what you're saying. You think, well, Faz, surely that amounts to acceptance. I'm not accepting it. I am realistic though. Again, I was a school teacher. I know people are going to do dumb stuff. You can't just say no, sit back and absolve yourself of responsibility. That's not the way the world works, the way people work. All that will happen is you will then be seen as somebody who is a wall on that issue. And people won't respect you, and you won't be able to guide them in the right direction. So, you've got to be realistic about these things. I'm in no way condoning use. What I'm saying is saying no doesn't work. People are going to do things anyway. It would be better if they had advice and support. And I don't know how that looks. I'm not an expert. I don't know how that looks, but there must be something. Okay. Next question. Congrats. What's your opinion on flexion rows from RP? That's from Andy's Kitchen Garden. So I think contextually they can be useful. I think they can be useful as a rehab exercise. If your lower back is hurt, to strengthen your spine, for example, because you're rounding your spine over and then you're arching it. So the spine very rarely gets trained through a full range of motion. The spine generally gets trained statically. If you do deadlifts or squats, you're told to keep your back straight. So it does have some niche uses for like rehab or trying to strengthen your back in positions it doesn't normally move in. As a back exercise, though, like an upper back exercise, horrendous, absolutely terrible. No one's building muscle like that. For the record, I will say no one's building muscle like that. It's an easy option for weak-minded people, and only those people follow that type of thing as an actual upper back muscle builder. For a rehab, lower back strengthening, spinal strengthening thing, it's a different case altogether. There's a use case for that. Next question. I'm in my 8th week of the wizard, and I'm curious what progression through your programs on Boostcamp do you recommend? What should I do next? No, man, there is no progression. You run the routine over and over. The idea is with these routines, the wizard, I ran for 4 years. All of my programs are programs that I've done. I don't like to just make stuff up. It's not my thing. I don't do the whole Jeff Nippard full body routine, which I've never done before. I put it out there, or volume recommendations, which I have no practical experience of. Everything that I've put out has got my stamp for approval behind it because I did it. There may be some minor variations which I've tried on clients, but for the most part, the basis of the program is things that I've done for not just a week or a month, for at least a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in some cases. So no, the idea is you run it again, but with your updated numbers. So if you started off with a 50-pound bench press and you ended with a 80-pound bench press, you go back to the beginning with an 80-pound bench press. Now, at a certain point, you won't be able to progress on that beginner routine. That's when I would recommend buying the book and running the intermediate version. I go through progressions in the book, and that's how it's done. Yeah. My books are not just static programs, in case I know a lot of people are familiar with them, but my books are actually progressions: beginner, intermediate, advanced, how to apply things at different stages. So in the books, you have a lot more detail. So if you are ever at a point where you really believe the volume or the routine has run its course, get the book. That will explain how to move to the intermediate phase and from there. For pull-ups, do you like to fully lock out at the bottom or keep a slight bend in the elbow? You guys should lock out. I don't, because it doesn't suit my shoulder. So barbell Bryce, thank you. Next question. What do you think about going through phases of moderate to high volumes, 50 to 20 sets per body part per week, until you stall, then going through a phase of lower volume, high intensity, then back to volume once you stall? That's from Patrick Bateman. Interesting. Surprising he has time to work out so much, being a Wall Street banker. I would say this is exactly what I've been talking about the last 3 months on this channel. I don't know if you guys ever watched that old English comedy, Faulty Towers, is it? Where the waiter would have an idea, and the boss would repeat the idea as if it was his own idea. And then the waiter would be like, great idea. Yeah, that was the joke. They did it a lot. This kind of sounds a bit like that. Yeah, yeah. Dude, that's exactly what I've been saying the past few months on his channel. Yeah, I do that. I do that a lot. But I think you're kind of might maybe going about it the wrong way. You mentioned until you stall. I don't agree with that. Like a stall is not a routine problem. Just let that sink in. 99 times out of 100, a stall is not a routine problem. It's a lifestyle problem. So I think you're jumping a gun a bit there. Your words are kind of like betraying your priorities there. More often than not, most major plateaus can be solved via food or lifestyle choices rather than change routine. People change routine far too frequently. And every time I make a video about this, of which I've made many over the last few months, um, I do emphasize that that's not something you want to be doing very often. It's it's something you can do. We're talking about, again, routines. You stick to a routine for a year and a half. They're not things that you want to be mixing in and out of on a monthly basis, weekly basis, or whenever you stall. You stall, you fix what causes the stall. You don't change your routine. That's crazy. So, um, yeah, I like the question. As I say, it's just things I've covered before extensively over the last few months. But just be very cautious about your reasons for changing. That's from, okay. What's a simple method to periodize an exercise going from sets of tens to sets of eights to sets of fives? How long should I stay at a certain rep range before I move to another? What's a simple method to periodize? Well, you just add weight to the bar. You just add weight, your reps come down. It's that simple. How long should you stay at a certain rep range? Until you stay at it for as long as you can milk it. Now, in the jacked intellectual, I give a 6-week block, but that's because the routine has to be finite. I'm training people remotely with that routine. Boostcamp, Boostcamp houses my jacked intellectual routine. It's a fantastic routine. I have some great feedback on it. But what I will say is the reason that they are split up into 6-week blocks is because it's a routine where it's on Boostcamp. I'm not coaching you one to one. If I was coaching you one to one, we probably wouldn't do a 6-week block. We would milk it for a while before we moved on. So don't be so keen to change reps. Once you're burnt out on tens, then go down to eights. I often leave the gym feeling I could have done more reps on squats. What are your tips for overcoming this? That's a question from Super Domino 82. That feeling you get, hold on to that and remember it next time you're in the gym to get more reps. Because it's about, you know, clearly if you're feeling that way at the end of the workout, you might not be feeling that way during the course of the set unless you're just stopping arbitrarily. Well, it's a sign to you that you need to work harder. Now, what I will say is, all credit to you, at least you acknowledge that your intensity is lacking. A lot of people find that very difficult. So well done for having the, I would say, strength of character and honesty to acknowledge that, yeah, you could work harder. Because I think that's quite a difficult thing for some people to do. I have to have conversations about intensity with clients. And I will say 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, they are on board and they are, they understand what I'm trying to say. But every now and again, you'll have a conversation with somebody and they'll get really upset. And it's a shame because you don't want to upset people as a coach, but talking about intensity, you have to give people the real deal. You have to say, look, this is the factor that's missing from your training. I don't enjoy those conversations because they can be, I mean, they always kind of feel, you don't want to tell somebody who's working hard that they need to be working harder, but sometimes that's what they need. It's like telling somebody who's not able to lose weight that perhaps they're not tracking calories very well. Like they already feel they're doing the best. So if you say that, it can be misinterpreted as being negative. But well done to you. You've acknowledged that you could work harder. So yeah, just bring that into the next session. Well, that's a long question. Been running Wizard for 14 weeks now and loving the explicit encouragement for deloads every 4 weeks, especially now in my early 40s. Was hitting way too many overuse injuries previously. That being said, while the deload feels good, the week right after deload always feels like it feels bad, especially for legs. I get DOMs going back. Grit my teeth and bear it. My God, this is a wordy question. Oh My deload looks like 75 to 80% of working weight. Okay. So basically, he's doing a deload with about 75 to 80% of working weight, same reps, and 2 sets rather than 3. So small reductions in intensity and volume, but he is still in the gym. And he still seems to get a lot of DOMs and soreness going back. That doesn't make sense. You shouldn't be getting those kind of DOMs coming back from a deload where you've still been training. I've never seen that happen before ever. So what you're doing is not related to there's something about the deloads which, and it's not the fact you're doing them. It's something you're doing maybe the week you come back. Maybe you're able to push harder the week you come back. Maybe your intensity isn't that great normally, and the week off allows you to push harder when you get back, and you're training extra hard and you're getting extra sore. But having that level of soreness on the wizard, especially, which is a full body routine, that makes absolutely zero sense to me. Maybe you're overworking your legs. Maybe you need to do cut back on the volume with legs. A common thing that I say to people is cut back to one top set of squats and deadlifts on heavy day. That is a lot more manageable. So rather than it being a deload issue, I would look at your load management and just how much volume you're doing. If it's a consistent leg DOM issue, pull back on your leg volume and see if you can still gain. If you seem to have a problem with recovery, because you've said you've had overuse injuries before, you may just need to pull back on the volume. That's all. Pull back on the volume. Try this, Nick. Try this. Okay. Do 1 set per exercise on everything and see if you still gain. And when I mean 1 set, I mean take that set to the house. Don't hold back. Don't do an easy set and go, oh, this routine's easy. Take it to the house and try that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever you train, and see if that improves your ability to recover better and reduces your DOMs. But training body parts 3 times a week and still training during deloads and getting DOMs coming back from a deload, that makes zero sense. Not something that typically happens, but that would be my advice would be you're just simply overloading and doing too much volume regardless. Next question. Hey Faz, what are your, also by the way, with that question, if you're going to ask questions, please keep them concise, right? Hey Faz, what are your general cardio recommendations for improving health and gym performance? For example, steps, days per week, duration per session. Right. So for health, I would say try to get your cardio, your heart rate into a reasonable range. Like some zone 2 work, perhaps at least 3 non-consecutive days per week. That's what I've seen in the research, which is shown to have robust improvements. I mean, with cardio, any cardio is going to help, but if you're trying to make long-term improvements, the research does seem to suggest you want at least 3 non-consecutive days where you get your heart rate into a challenging zone. That will lead to improvement. And also that should be for about 25 minutes, 20 minutes, at least at the minimum. So typically speaking, I prescribe 30 minutes because you need time to get your heart rate up. So 30 is pretty good. And then you can build from there. With regards to steps, I think a reasonable amount is at least 8K per day. But for steps, you're not necessarily doing that for health. It's just to stay active. Like it's not going to improve your heart health. I mean, don't get me wrong. Steps is a healthy thing to do, but to improve your heart health, you usually need to push the heart rate higher than steps will give you. I mean, if your heart rate's getting to 140 when you're walking, then you've got bigger problems. Next question. What are the best GPP workouts to do at home and or in the gym for natural lifters? Okay. Right. I'm going to just completely blow open your world here for a second, my man. That's from Ricardo. So Ricardo, let me give you a little bit of a history lesson on this. GPP was a term which was popularized in the early 2000s, late 90s by a man called Louis Simmons. Louis Simmons used to predominantly work with men on steroids who are anywhere between 300 to 400 pounds. That was his predominant audience. And that's where the term GPP was popularized. It was popularized because men on 5 grams of gear who squat 1,000 pounds, weighing 350 pounds, which is most of who he's talking to, typically are not the guys who are doing step count or are doing hours on the treadmill or are doing any cardiovascular exercise apart from walking to McDonald's after they've got out of their car and driven most of the way. GPP was a way of getting his fat guys to do cardio, and the world lapped it up. Why did the world lap it up? Because generally speaking, most big fat guys also like to think that they are hard men. You know, they're big men. You know, the whole anything under 200 pounds is prey. You've heard that before, right? Most big fat guys along who are they like the whole like, yeah, we're big. Even though their cardiovascular fitness is to the point where if they ever got into an actual fight, they would drop dead before they even threw a punch. No, he had to convince fat drug taking powerlifters and equipped powerlifters, I'm not even going to call them athletes, that they needed to do some cardio to condition themselves for the gym. That's how GPP was born. And it was applied by every 155 pounder on the internet who is natty. GPP is needed by big guys because they can't run. They can't even walk on inclined treadmills because it will wreck their knees. When you're 350 pounds and you're already slamming your joints with 1,000-pound squats, there is no jogging. There is no step count. There is no inclined treadmill. There is no elliptical trainer. There's none of that. That's who needs GPP. GPP is a myth. It's not about GPP. It's about getting your heart rate up. When you're that big and 3 out of 6 of your meals is at McDonald's, just walking around is cardio. Just existing is zone 2. You exist in zone 2. That's what GPP was for. And the whole world believed that they needed GPP because everyone likes to feel manly. Like it's all marketing. Like the classic thing is in England, I don't know if this is true in America, but in England, you can get 2 different types of Diet Coke, right? One with one which is in a silver can, and that's just called regular Diet Coke, right? And you get another one which is Coke Zero, and it's black with like red writing, whatever. And that was done to appeal to men because it's more manly. A man doesn't want to have a regular Diet Coke can and his wife is having. He's a man. He's a man. I don't want a Diet Coke. I want a Coke Zero with lightning because he feels like a man then. Me personally, I feel like a man due to my oversized genitalia. I don't need stuff like that, right? Whereas for a lot of people, they need these little fancy terms like GPP, power building to feel like they are something special. You don't. GPP, all you need to do is get your heart rate up. Get your heart rate up to zone 2 and zone 3. That's all you need for conditioning. However you want to do that, I don't care. You want to skip, you want to hop, you want to jump, you want to dance, I don't care. Doesn't matter. And neither should you care. You should do whatever you can so that it doesn't interfere with the rest of your workouts, the rest of your week, and that you enjoy. I do elliptical, step mill, or incline treadmill because I enjoy it. I can normally put a YouTube video on, listen to that, or I can talk to my friend and maintain a reasonable heart high. And that's what I do because I enjoy it. Do not be fooled. GPP is a marketing term believed by idiots. You are not an idiot. Nobody on this channel listening to this is. So 20 years later, I've just myth busted that for you. There is no GPP. It's cardio for fat guys who are 350 pounds, squat 1,000 pounds, and take 5 grams of tren per week. That's not you. Do your cardio, whatever way you enjoy, just get your heart rate up and do that for 20, 30 minutes, at least 3 non-consecutive days per week, and move from there. That's all it is. Don't be fooled by the marketing. Weight and how it affects you when you age. I'm 5'3", 210 pounds. Okay. I could easily get to 230, but I'm 44 and worried about BMI health markers. It's from John. John, I'm going to say this with as much love as possible. Please don't take offense. I had a brief look at your profile picture. I would not be comfortable being that body fat at that age. Okay. Yeah, you need to take care of yourself, bro. You don't need to be 210 pounds. That's not going to serve you at this point or when you're 60 or whatever. Yeah, I would really take it upon yourself to start losing some chub. I mean, I don't want to single you out because I think that's kind of a mean thing to do, but for your own health's sake, you should be worried now, you know? So good luck. Do email me. I've got a consultation form on my website. Email me if you want some help with that. And I'm happy to help you out. So, but yeah, like now is the time. Yesterday is the time you need to address that. That's not something you want to be doing mid 40s. Okay. Guys who are that big don't tend to survive into their 60s. Next question relating to the wizard. Why do you suggest adding the volume on a heavy day instead of spreading out over the week? Well, you got to put it somewhere, you know? Gotta put it somewhere. Heavy day is a good one because heavy day, typically speaking, is your most stressful day. So you get all that stress onto a heavy day, and then you got some time to relax and recuperate. Also, it's a practical reason. What are you going to do? Set up different exercise 3 times a week for 1 set each, or set up one additional exercise for 3 sets. But once you've set up, you may as well do all 3 sets. It's just convenience. Just convenience. Um, Also curious why 1 set for HM legs on Boostcamp and 3 on the PDF. Yeah, the 1 set for heavy and medium is traditionally what I did. So when I first ran the program, that's what I did. And that's if you're doing heavy lifts, like if you're doing like a home gym type of thing, like with a barbell squat, barbell deadlift, stiff leg deadlift, I would recommend 1 set. I don't think you need more than that. But not that I don't think, I know you don't, because that's how I ran it for 4 years. Um, when I was in my home gym doing the wizard for when I was inventing the routine back in 2007, 2010, um, I never did multiple sets for heavy lower body compounds because I didn't need to. Progress was fine without. With 3 on the PDF, because through coaching people, people wanted to do more. So generally speaking, while I've been coaching people who wanted to do more, they've got access to nicer bits of equipment like hack squats and leg presses. And yeah, there's an argument to be made. You could do more sets if you're doing a belt squat or a hack squat or whatever. Ultimately, though, pick what you can recover from. Only do enough where you can recover and you can gain. You don't have to do an excessive amount to do enough that allows you that you can perform progressive overload. That's from Sean Toe Mac. Next question. Thoughts on cutting just to facilitate more bulking and not for aesthetics? I have no desire to be lean at the moment, but have been struggling with appetite. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for this. Thanks for all the info. You are so underrated. Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate that. Michael, I think that's a great idea. I mean, you might not be aware of this, Michael, but that is traditionally how people have done small what they're now called, excuse me, what they're now called mini cuts. Um, Very common, very common. Now in recent years, we have heard the term mini cut as a specific 4 to 6 week period where people pull back, and it's become kind of its own thing. What I will say is, when I was being educated on these matters, these things weren't called mini cuts. What you would do is you would have a long gaining phase, say 10 months. And during the course of those 10 months, you would have natural positions where you pull back a bit on food, let the body stabilize, harden up a little bit, even pull back in weight a little bit, and you'd go back up again. And off season nowadays, people discuss, even if you listen to YouTube coaches nowadays, they will talk about how you should gain 2 pounds a month, like it's some exact formula. Like 2 pounds a month, 5 months, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, all this kind of like it's not an exact formula. Nobody's lives are perfect. So the way that I was taught how to do things was by people who, actually knew what they were doing, is the way that I teach my clients and how I manage their bulks and off seasons. And that is the off season is a flowing process. You're going to have times where you gain a bit too much weight. So you need to pull back. You're going to have times where you're not eating enough because you're tired, you're stressed out. So you want to push forward a little bit more. It's it's a flow. It's life. We're human beings. So if you do feel like you're maybe running out of room to bulk, then sure. Doesn't mean the off season's over. Doesn't mean you have to like cut, pull back a little bit. Just let some of the water come off, let some of the weight come off. Maybe even having a position where you're dieting. You're still gonna be able to gain. If you're that overweight, you're still gonna be able to gain muscle. You're still gonna be able to gain strength. Everybody's even if you're doing a contest prep, you're still gaining muscle within the first couple of months. Everyone knows that. You don't all of a sudden stop gaining strength as soon as you get into a deficit. So yeah, you can still have a long, successful off season by these small dips and troughs and all that kind of stuff. That's just that's just bulking, man. That's just bulking. Nowadays we give it a name. We call it a mini cut and stuff like mini cut movements and things like just bulking, bro. Just bulking. It's just the way it's done. It's the way it's always been done. That's the way I was taught. Anyway, it's the way it's always been done. Nowadays you have to have a name. Now, and by the way, I'm not saying anything wrong with the name. I know that for the purpose of education, you have to apply names to things so that people can understand what you're talking about. I get that. So I'm not begrudging the term minicut. I'm just saying like there's nothing special about it. It is just how to manage an off season. So yeah, dude, go for it. Pull back for a few weeks until you've had enough, and then go again. It's you're still bulking. It's still a bulk. Any lifts you can think of that would be good for kickboxing? Some bronze, silver. Yes. Any general weightlifting routine. This is, I would say, combat sports have the greatest misunderstanding when it comes to strength training of almost any sport. Even footballers are better, like, soccer players are better. And soccer, and the level of coaching and physical education coaching in soccer is horrendous, given the amount of money that's in that sport. Kickboxing, you need to be stronger year round. Let me tell you a little story. I did 3 years of MMA when I was at university. I did a discipline called Vale Tudo. That basically means no holds barred. It's like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I did that from the ages of like must be 19 to 22 or something, anyway, whatever it was. But anyway, I went into that with a 5.5 plate deadlift, a 5 plate squat, like a 3 plate bench. Nobody who was at my amateur level could touch me ever because I just pick them up and throw them. How do you get somebody into a hold who squats and deadlifts that much? You can't do it. None of the guys who are at the amateur level, who are on my level, could touch me because it's too strong, way too strong. People don't understand that about combat sports. You need to be strong. You look at some of the best combat sports athletes right now. By the way, I'm not suggesting I remember any of that. It was a long time ago. You look at guys like Hamzat Chimaev, Shavkat Rakhmonov, probably butchering their names, but those guys, Islam Makhachev, those guys are all strong as heck. Strong as hell. Like you need general strength, kickboxing, combat sports, and boxing and everything. One of the stupidest things that I see boxers do is they get their dumbbells and they start punching. One too many hits in the head. This guy's got no sense. All you're doing is practicing being slow. It is the most moronic thing ever. Build your basic strength up outside the gym, right? Or, in the gym. And when you're in your combat gym, practice being fast, practice your skills, practice your techniques. That's how it's done. Don't make the mistake of traditional like combat sports strength training, which is just moronic for the most part. What are your thoughts on any type of Zercher variation, Zercher squat, Zercher deadlifts? Um, have you ever programmed these lifts or found any benefits? Congrats on the amazing milestone from Sunil. I think Sunil is an old friend of mine. I'm pretty sure he is. If that's you, man, say hello. Um, yeah, I have programmed before in the past. Yeah. Listen, man, I was young just like everyone else. At some point, I did all that stupid stuff. Sorry, I shouldn't say it, but like I did all that stuff. Like I did the Jefferson lifts, I did the odd lifts. I mean, come on, guy. I competed in strongman. I competed in grip competitions. I did all that stuff. Dinny finger lifts, um, farmers walks, carries, loaded weighted hold, weighted hangs. I did all that stuff because it just sounds cool. It's kind of fun. I used to love doing farmers walks and things like that. I used to do Zerchers, loved all that kind of stuff. Like it's kind of fun. It's unusual, but the reality was like, it was all pretty pointless, for what it was kind of pointless. It was fun. Like if fun is the point and you find it fun, then yeah, do it. But with regards to it being an exercise, no, it's just the kind of things that contrarian people do to stand out. It's not for me. It's not for me at all. There's some niche use for like maybe strengthening certain parts of your body through extreme ranges of motion, like perhaps rounding your back, strengthening your spine, the spinal muscles, or strengthening parts of the knee through deep extended ranges of motion with that. But aside from that, all these things, I grew out of doing them, to be honest, kind of childish. I don't like them. I don't program them. I don't find there's any kind of benefits apart from being psychological. It's the whole, I don't know, man, but I'm not going to say, I'm not going to try and put that in anyone's fun. If you find them fun, cool, but they're not useful. Question: opinions on behind neck pressing and where it best fits into the program. Love the channel, by the way. Severely undervalued. Thank you so much. That's from Louis. I can't read that. Yeah. So pressing as at a whole generally works best in the context of a lower volume routine. Most guys who are really big on pressing and get really passionate about pressing being involved in the program typically do lower volumes. They might not say they do low volume. They might go, "Oh, I hate low volume. I hate minimalism," but they do low volumes. In the grand scheme of things, if you look at the broad range of the fitness landscape, right, they're on the lower side. As I've always said, I have no problem with overhead pressing at all. Never had any issues with it. Hand net pressing is absolutely fine. If your shoulder can take it, cool. It'll probably be quite good for maintaining flexibility. It's quite good. May even be good for maintaining shoulder health. Like fantastic. But they only ever fit within the context of a lower volume routine, because if you're doing them within the context of a relatively high volume bodybuilding routine, you are going to struggle with shoulder and elbow recovery, just the way it is. So, yeah. How to fit them in? I mean, you can fit them in any routine, but as I say, overall context, the volume should be on the lower side to be able to fit that in and still do a sufficient amount of everything else. If you're trying to add them into a high volume routine where you're doing potentially 10 plus sets of barbell pressing per week or machine pressing or pressing in general, you're really going to struggle with recovery. Programming back work, do you believe it's better to have more or less overlap in each session? For example, in the upper lower, having one day focused on lat development, another on upper back, having more even mix of the two on each day. Wow. I think that's a little bit confused. Like pull downs and rows are both going to work the lats and upper back. And basically there's your answer. Um, don't don't get too far down the weeds with this kind of stuff, guys. Okay. Any kind of pull down is going to work the whole back, except for maybe the lower back. Any kind of row is going to work the whole back. The biasing doesn't come from being a pull down or a row. It comes from more from the elbow position and the exercise itself. So yeah, don't think in those terms. Like, I would just personally have an even split on both days of pull downs and rows. But even more important than that, right, guys? Even more important than that, like these arbitrary rules, find exercises that you connect with, that feel good for you. Like me personally, I get on great with a good hammer strength pullover machine. Love them. I also get on great with weighted chins. I also like various types of machine rows. Those are my staples. Always loved them, always will like them. They work great for me. Now, find the ones that work well for you. That's a lot more important than trying to categorize. Because I know everyone wants to do it. Everyone wants the perfect routine. Just find exercises that you can connect with, that you can load and work well for you, and load those over time. That's the key. That's the magic. That's the secret. So that is the main thought on the topic. Next question. At this point, after listening to you for a while, it feels like most any question I could think of has already been answered. I guess one thing I still need some help figuring out is how I'm getting much stronger while bulking, but not seeing much size gain in my arms. I'm very low volume, 4 to 6 sets a week on a full body every other day. Okay. But the strength keeps coming each week, but I got no gorilla arm. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Okay. Yeah, good question. I suppose what I will say is just zooming out a little bit on, especially if you're not particularly gifted, arms are the last place you're going to see a lot of growth. Mostly because like that's bodybuilding is about looking good with adding mass to your extremities. Yeah. Because getting fatter, that all goes on your torso. So generally speaking, guys put on a bit of weight. And obviously when you're bulking, you're going to put on weight, muscle and fat, a combination of both. And that normally comes predominantly in the torso because, well, fat accumulates in your torso, right? So visually speaking, your torso is the first to get bigger. It's like, I'll give you the classic example is the fat guy who's on Reddit saying, I don't train my legs any longer because my legs are massive. And everyone knows he's just fat with fat legs. You know, you've seen it before. You've seen like a thread on Reddit where a guy's like, oh man, I don't even train my legs and my jeans don't even fit, man. My genetics are amazing. My legs are huge. And everyone, no one says it because everyone's too polite. But everyone knows. Everyone just rolls their eyes and goes, oh, it's another fat guy talking about his fat legs. Everyone knows. Because listen, fat comes onto your torso and your legs way before your arms. So when people grow, when they bulk, some of what they see is muscle, yes. But a lot of what they see and they mistake as muscle is just body fat accumulating onto their frames. So you probably haven't gained that much overall muscle yet. I'm not saying you've got fat. I'm just saying overall, you're probably gaining perfectly well. You're on a good routine. I'm sure you're doing well. I'm sure you're doing your best. But as weight comes onto your frame, it's going to come onto the arms the last. And it's the same when you eventually diet. Let's say you gain a ton of muscle 2 years down the line and you do your first big diet phase, your physique is going to transform. And all of a sudden, you're going to see how small your waist is. This is one of the things that I saw when I first started dieting. I realized just how tiny my waist was. And that made my arms look so much bigger. Fortunately, the best thing I did for the size of my arms relative to my torso was actually strip body fat. Again, body fat accumulates onto your torso. It's a visual thing. Reality is you probably haven't gained like an inordinate amount of muscle everywhere. You've just gained some muscle, which is great, and which is normal, by the way. I'm not putting you down. And you've probably gained some body fat on the torso, which is normal. I'm not putting you down. And on your legs, which is normal. I'm not putting you down. Proportionally speaking, people don't gain that much on their fat on their arms. And that's probably what you're experiencing. It would be highly unlikely if you were training full body 3 times a week and your arms weren't growing proportionally. I'm sure they are. Usually speaking, you need to gain quite a lot of muscle to really start to go, oh, yeah, wow, I've got big arms. You know, those 18-inch, 19-inch arms come when you've already got a 45, 46, 47, 48-inch chest, right? That's how it happens. So generally speaking, it's not that you've got small arms. You're probably not huge all over. That's all. Okay. In a bulk, we know a lot about surplus quantity, e.g. 100 to 500 calories, but how important is surplus quality? If I make the extra calories up with chicken versus dairy milk with this. By the way, I'm pretty sure this guy's from the UK. When he says dairy milk, he's not referring to milk from a cow. Dairy milk is a brand of chocolate we have here. So he's asking, what's better to up the calories from chicken or chocolate? Would this make a noticeable difference to your physique? Cheers and congrats on 10K. That's moved up very fast the last few weeks. Yeah, I mean, that's all down to Alex. His that appearance on his podcast netted me about 1,400 subs. Crazy. I mean, his channel's huge, you know, so it was a big step up for my channel. So I'm very, very grateful to be on there. I've thanked him in private afterwards as well. He's super nice. By the way, Alex is a really nice guy. Just genuinely a very decent dude. So I'm glad that his channel is doing well because he's genuinely a nice person. You know, take it from me. I spoke to him like off the camera as well. Very, very nice guy. I don't say that about everyone, but like super nice guy. So yeah. With regards to yeah, dude, come on, is that a serious question? You're gonna get better results with chicken. You know my stance on protein. High protein is the way forward. Odds are you're probably not eating 1.5 grams per pound, so you are gonna get benefits going higher. And I'm not even sure the benefits cap out. At a certain point, it's a case of convenience and also taste and living your life. For some people, the cutoff of, right, that's it, I want to have chocolate real bad, comes a lot sooner. And, you know, they might not even be able to make it up to a gram per pound before they're like, right, see, I'm done. I need to have my beer, I need to have my burgers, I need to have my pizza, I need to have this, I need to have that, I need to have more of this, more rice, more vegetables, all that kind of stuff. And they'll tap out. Like, generally speaking, the benefits do not cap out until, in my experience, about 1.5 grams per pound. So pretty bloody high. Some bodybuilders eat 2 grams per pound of body weight. So yeah, you're going to get much better results with chicken rather than chocolate. Anyway, listen, I'm going to call it there. There are questions to go. If there is sufficient interest, I will round up the rest at a later date. But for now, we're going to call it there. But once again, I wanted to just thank you guys and just say appreciate so much the support. The 10K was awesome. Hitting 10K is fantastic, and honestly, I was blown away. I was so happy with the achievement. It was this year has been pretty awesome for that. I mean, it's, you know what it is? It's the professional recognition to be able to be recognized by you guys as hitting 10K. And then at the same time this year to be recognized by Boostcamp as being on the level of, some of those coaches. I mean, I know knowledge wise, I'll put myself against anyone in the industry, and experience wise, I rank way above anyone else, most people in the industry. But in terms of social media following, I know I'm not there. To get that recognition, that international recognition amongst my peers alongside this, I mean, yeah, I couldn't be happier. So anyway, I'm going to call it there. See you guys next time for your regular videos.